For the longest time, the future of cars seemed totally set. It was going to be electric, period. But now, well, that future is looking a whole lot more complicated. So today, we're going to break down the real reasons the global EV boom suddenly slammed on the brakes.
I mean, it really wasn't that long ago, was it? The hype was just incredible. Yet governments, car makers, everyday people all convinced we were right on the edge of a total electric revolution. It felt like a done deal, completely inevitable.
And then, almost like a switch flipped, the whole story changed. Suddenly, automakers are scaling back their grand plans, sales targets are being missed left and right, and all the headlines went from EV boom to EV slowdown. So the big question is, why? How did we get from the future is here to, well, maybe not so fast?
Now, what's really fascinating here is that this wasn't just one thing going wrong. The answer is way more complex. The best way to think about it is like the entire EV movement slammed into four massive invisible walls all at the same time: the technology, the industry's profits, the user experience, and, of course, global politics. Let's break them down one by one.
All right, first up, the core technology itself. The whole promise of the EV future rests on one thing: the battery. And it turns out the battery just wasn't quite ready for what we were demanding of it. The hype simply got way ahead of the actual physics.
When you look at the hard numbers, the reality really starts to bite. I mean, despite all the talk of breakthroughs, the energy density of lithium-ion batteries, that's basically how much juice you can cram into them, barely budged over a whole decade. Then, drivers started discovering the harsh truths for themselves. Your range just tanks in the winter. Constant fast charging actually damages the battery. And the cost to replace one? Wow. We're talking anywhere from $500,000 to 1.5 million yen. That's a terrifying number.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, but what about the next big thing? What about solid-state batteries? They were supposed to fix everything, right? Double the range, charge in minutes, the whole shebang. Well, the problem is they've stayed a promise locked away in a lab. Mass production turned out to be way too hard and way too expensive. So the miracle cure just wasn't there to save the day when the boom started to wobble.
And that leads us right into the second wall, the business itself. For the big, old-school car companies, this whole transition to electric wasn't just a challenge. It was becoming a financial black hole.
Here's the simple but absolutely brutal business problem. For most of these legacy automakers, every single EV they built and sold actually lost them money. They were totally caught in a trap, pouring billions into this new technology while the fundamental math just refused to work.
And we are not talking about small amounts here. I mean, just look at the giants: Ford, GM, Volkswagen. They were reporting losses in the billions of yen year after year just from their EV divisions. That's completely unsustainable. The whole idea that they could just scale up and profits would magically appear started to look, well, incredibly naive.
And if you want to know why they were losing so much money, it becomes crystal clear. That giant piece of the pie right there, that's the battery. It alone makes up a staggering 30 to 40% of the car's entire cost. So when you pile on billions in development costs and then sales don't take off like you'd hoped, you have a perfect recipe for a financial disaster.
So, faced with these massive losses, the big players had to do something. The domino started to fall. Ford hit the brakes on a new factory. GM pushed back its big EV plant. Mercedes completely ditched its ambitious goal to be all-electric by 2030. And this just created a huge negative feedback loop. When the giants slow down, the entire supply chain, everybody from parts makers to charging companies, they all slam on the brakes too.
Which brings us to our third wall, the actual day-to-day experience of owning an EV. The marketing promised us this sleek, seamless, futuristic lifestyle. But for a whole lot of people, the reality was filled with frustration and hassle.
On one hand, you had the promise, charge anywhere, anytime, it'll be so convenient. But the reality, especially for anyone who didn't have a private garage, was more like a scavenger hunt for a charger that wasn't broken or already in use. The infrastructure wasn't really a network, it was just a collection of disconnected dots on a map, which is a huge problem if you live in an apartment or want to take a long road trip.
And these are the kinds of frustrations that really spread, you know? Word of mouth travels fast. Range anxiety became full-blown winter panic. People found out that fast charging could still mean sitting around for 30, 40, even 50 minutes. Drivers were genuinely shocked at how fast cruising on the highway could kill their battery. And underneath it all, this quiet fear started to grow. Is every charge I do slowly ruining my incredibly expensive battery? But really, when you strip everything else away, you hit the biggest, simplest wall of all: price. On top of all those other issues, the super high upfront cost, combined with the fact that resale values were dropping like a rock and electricity prices were going up, it just meant that for an average family, an EV was a financial non-starter. The market for early adopters just wasn't big enough to carry the whole revolution.
So finally, let's zoom out to our fourth and final wall. Because right as all these other problems were starting to boil over, the entire global political stage shifted, and governments started having second thoughts about their all-in on EVs strategy.
You've got to remember, a huge part of the EV boom was propped up by government money, subsidies. And what happened when that money started to disappear? Well, in the US, in the EU, in China, as soon as those subsidies got smaller or ended completely, sales just fell off a cliff. It was a painful reveal that a lot of the demand wasn't natural, it was artificial.
And then, a geopolitical earthquake shook the entire auto industry. See, while the West was struggling with all of this, China had been quietly building an incredibly efficient, incredibly powerful EV industry that was suddenly ready to take over the world.
People started talking about the BYD effect. What is that? It's the shockwave that hit when Western automakers and governments realized that Chinese companies were making fantastic EVs that were 20, 30, even 40% cheaper than theirs. All of a sudden, the fear became, if we push for an all-electric future too fast, we might actually be handing our entire domestic car industry over to China.
And so, the West's strategy flipped from offense to defense. The US and the EU slapped huge tariffs on Chinese EVs. They launched investigations. And maybe most importantly, those hard deadlines for banning gas cars, like the EU's 2035 target, were suddenly up for debate again. The political unity behind an EV-only future was officially broken.
So let's put all the pieces together. What does this all mean? It's really easy to look at all of this and say, well, that's it. The electric car is dead. But that's just not the right way to see it. This isn't an EV defeat, it's a reality check, a much-needed one.
The reason the boom ended is that it was built on a flawed idea. The dream that one single technology, the battery electric car, was going to be the perfect answer for everyone, everywhere, for every situation. And as we've just seen, reality is always a lot more complicated than that.
So the future that's taking shape now is a lot smarter, and it's all about diversification. It's about using the right tool for the right job. Pure EVs, they are fantastic for city driving, for your daily commute. Hybrids are really coming into their own as the practical, powerful choice for everything else. Hydrogen might be the answer for huge trucks and long-haul shipping. And yeah, the good old gas engine is going to stick around for a while, where the other options just don't make sense yet. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. The EV boom didn't fail because electric cars are a bad idea. It just slowed down because the world woke up from this dream of a simple, one-size-fits-all future. Maybe the real mistake was never about betting on EVs, but in believing there was only one road forward to begin with.